The dust devils danced across Main Street like drunken spirits, swirling red earth into miniature tornadoes that scattered when they hit the weathered storefronts of Sage Hollow, Wyoming. It was August 1883, and the summer heat pressed down on the town like an iron skillet, baking the wooden sidewalks until they creaked with every footstep. The air shimmered with mirages that promised water where only alkali flats stretched toward the horizon. Eli McKenna stood on the porch of Henderson's General Store, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow in the late afternoon sun. At 30 years old, he cut an imposing figure, 6 feet 2 inches of lean muscle, hardened by years of working cattle under the unforgiving Wyoming sky. His face, once considered handsome by the local women, had taken on a granite quality since the fire. Dark stubble covered a strong jaw that rarely softened into a smile anymore, and his gray eyes held the kind of distance that made folks step aside when he walked down the street. McKenna. The sharp voice belonged to Dorothy McKenna, his mother, who emerged from the store like a small thundercloud in black taffeta. Despite the heat, she wore her morning dress buttoned to the throat, a habit she'd maintained for 2 years now. Don't think you can avoid this conversation by hiding out here. Eli didn't turn from his contemplation of the horizon. Not hiding, mother, working. Got fence to mend before the storm hits. Storm won't be here for days yet. Dorothy moved to stand beside him, barely reaching his shoulder even in her Sunday boots. Lila Cartwright arrives on tomorrow's stage. The least you can do is meet her properly. The muscle in Eli's jaw tightened. Already told you my thoughts on that arrangement. Your thoughts? Dorothy's laugh held no humor. Your thoughts won't save the McKenna name from ruin. This ranch needs a proper mistress, someone who knows how to conduct herself in society. The Cartwrights are one of Boston's finest families. Then let them stay in Boston. Eli finally turned to face his mother, his expression as unyielding as the granite peaks that rose beyond the town. I won't marry for convenience or contracts. Not for you, not for the ranch, not for any damn family name. Dorothy's face flushed beneath her powder. You have responsibilities. Elijah, your father built this ranch from nothing, and your brother... She stopped, her voice catching on the name she couldn't speak. Sam is dead, Eli said flatly. Has been for 2 years. Marrying some Eastern princess won't bring him back. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken grief. Finally, Dorothy straightened her spine with the determination that had helped her survive 30 years in the territory. Miss Cartwright will arrive tomorrow. You will meet her, and you will show her the courtesy due a lady of her standing. That's not a request. She swept back into the store, leaving Eli alone with the rising wind that carried the scent of sage and distant rain. 20 miles east, the same wind buffeted the overland stage as it lurched along the rutted trail toward Sage Hollow. Inside, Clara Green pressed herself into the corner of the hard wooden seat, trying to make herself invisible among the other passengers. A drummer selling patent medicines, a cavalry officer returning to Fort Laramie, and 2 rough-looking men who'd spent most of the journey passing a flask between them. Clara's dress, once a respectable blue calico, had faded to the color of winter sky and bore the stains of 1,000 miles of travel. The hem was caked with mud from Missouri to Wyoming, and the careful patches she'd sewn couldn't hide where the fabric had worn through at the elbows. Her brown hair, which she'd pinned up so carefully in Independence, now hung in limp strands beneath a bonnet that had lost most of its shape to rain and sun. She clutched the leather satchel in her lap, everything she owned in the world, including the letter that had brought her to this desolate place. The paper was soft from handling, the words memorized but still unbelievable. Dear Miss Green, your correspondence has touched my heart. A God-fearing woman of good character is exactly what a lonely rancher needs. Please come at once to Sage Hollow. I will be waiting at the stage depot. Your devoted husband-to-be, Mr. Thomas Hartley. Clara had sold everything, her mother's wedding ring, the family Bible, even her winter coat, to buy passage west. The marriage broker in St. Louis had promised her that Mr. Hartley was a prosperous rancher, a widower seeking a helpmate and companion. She'd written him 3 letters, pouring out her hopes for a simple life, children, a garden of her own. The stage lurched to a stop, throwing Clara against the drummer. "Sage Hollow," the driver shouted. 30-minute stop. Clara's heart hammered as she gathered her courage and her satchel. This was it, the beginning of her new life. She climbed down from the stage on trembling legs, squinting in the harsh sunlight at the collection of buildings that made up the town. It was smaller than she'd imagined, rawer, with false-fronted stores and saloons lining a street that turned to mud when it rained and dust when it didn't. The other passengers dispersed quickly, leaving Clara standing alone beside the stage. She looked around for someone who might be Thomas Hartley, a kind-faced older gentleman, perhaps, with gentle eyes and work-worn hands. But the only men she saw were loungers outside the saloon, and their eyes held nothing gentle as they took in her shabby appearance. "You, Clara Green?" The station master, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, approached with the expression that made her stomach drop. "Yes, sir. I'm waiting for Mr. Hartley." The man spat into the dust. "Hartley's been dead 3 months. Apoplexy took him while he was branding calves." He looked her up and down with something between pity and disgust. "Another one of them mail-order brides, ain't you? 3rd one this year to show up for a dead man." The world seemed to tilt beneath Clara's feet. "But the letters. He wrote to me just last month." "Weren't no Hartley writing them letters. His foreman, Jake Morrison. He's been running that scam, collecting the passage money from desperate women." The station master shrugged. "Jake lit out for California 2 weeks ago. You been took?" Clara swayed, gripping the side of the stage for support. I don't understand. I have nowhere. I spent everything." "Not my problem." The man was already turning away. "Stage back east leaves day after tomorrow. If you got the fare. If not..." He gestured vaguely toward the saloon. "Big Nose Kate's always looking for girls." The implications in his tone were clear enough to penetrate Clara's shock. "I'm not that kind of woman," she said, lifting her chin despite the tears threatening to spill. "Then you better find another kind to be, and fast. This ain't no place for a woman alone with empty pockets." As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, Clara stood in the dusty street of Sage Hollow, her dreams as tattered as her dress. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the sound of laughter from the saloon. She had no money, no prospects, and no way home. The other mail-order brides who'd been deceived. What had become of them? Clara shuddered, pulling her thin shawl tighter. She would not end up in Big Nose Kate's establishment. She would find work, cooking, cleaning, anything honest. There had to be someone in this town who needed help. But as she went from store to store, the responses were the same. "No work here," or "We don't hire that kind," or worse. The leering suggestions that she knew exactly what kind of work was available for a woman in her position. By the time the sun touched the mountains, painting them purple and gold, Clara had been turned away from every respectable establishment in Sage Hollow. Her feet ached in her worn boots, and hunger gnawed at her stomach. She hadn't eaten since the jerky and hardtack breakfast on the stage. The first drops of rain began to fall as she stood outside the church, locked and dark. The minister gone to Denver for supplies. Even God seemed to have abandoned her in this foreign place. The rain came harder, soaking through her dress, washing the last of the trail dust into muddy streams that ran down Main Street. Clara stumbled toward the edge of town, seeking any shelter from the storm. Her teeth chattered as the temperature dropped with the sun, the high desert cold cutting through her wet clothes like knives. There, a fence line, and beyond it, the dark shapes of buildings. A ranch, perhaps, where she might find shelter in a barn until morning. She climbed through the fence rails, her skirts catching and tearing on the rough wood. The rain drove harder, turning the ground to mud that sucked at her boots. Lightning split the sky, illuminating a barn ahead. Clara staggered toward it, her strength failing with each step. But the distance was too great, her body too weak from hunger and exhaustion. Just yards from the barn door, Clara's legs gave out. She fell to her knees in the mud, then toppled sideways, her satchel spilling its meager contents into the rain. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the brand burned into the fence post, Circle M, with a horse head above it. The McKenna Ranch. The rain had stopped by the time Eli McKenna rode in from checking the north pasture. But the storm had left its mark. Lightning had spooked the cattle, scattering them across 2 valleys, and he'd spent hours rounding up strays. His oilcloth slicker glistened with moisture as he guided his horse. Tempest, through the ranch gate. That's when he saw her, a crumpled form near the old barn, looking like a pile of discarded rags in the mud. Eli's first instinct was to ride past, probably some drunk from town who'd wandered too far, or worse, someone looking to steal. He'd learned the hard way that kindness to strangers often came with a price, but something made him rein in Tempest and look closer. The figure was too small for a man, and that muddy fabric looked like a dress. A woman? Here? Eli dismounted, his boots squelching in the saturated ground as he approached cautiously. Clara lay still as death, her face pale as moonlight against the dark earth. Her lips had taken on a blue tinge, and her sodden clothes clung to her frame. Eli knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her neck. A pulse, faint but steady. He noticed the scattered contents of her satchel, a Bible warped by rain, a broken comb, letters bleeding ink into illegibility. For a moment, Eli stayed frozen, staring down at this stranger who'd collapsed on his land. The sensible thing would be to ride to town, fetch the sheriff, let someone else handle this problem. But as he looked at her worn boots, the careful patches on her dress, something twisted in his chest, she reminded him of... No, he wouldn't think about that night 2 years ago. Wouldn't remember Sam's voice calling for help while the barn burned. Wouldn't recall how the townspeople had stood watching, too afraid of the flames to act. By the time Eli had arrived from the far pasture, it was too late. Everyone had been too cautious, too afraid, too willing to let someone else take the risk. "Damn it all," Eli muttered, scooping Clara into his arms. She weighed less than a newborn calf, all bones and wet fabric. Her head lolled against his shoulder as he carried her to the old bunkhouse that sat empty since he'd let the last of the hands go. He couldn't bring her to the main house. His mother would have apoplexy if she found a strange woman there. The bunkhouse was musty, but dry. Eli laid Clara on one of the bare mattresses and lit a lantern, the yellow glow revealing just how bad she looked. Her skin had a gray undertone that spoke of prolonged hunger, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. He needed to get her warm and dry, but propriety made him hesitate. Then practicality won. She'd die if he left her in those wet clothes, moving quickly, with the clinical efficiency he used when treating injured animals. Eli wrapped her in thick wool blankets, leaving her soaked garments in a pile by the door. He built a fire in the small stove, filling the room with blessed heat. From the main house, he fetched beef broth that Cookie had left simmering for tomorrow's breakfast, plus more blankets and a bottle of whiskey for medicinal purposes. When he returned, Clara was stirring, soft moans escaping her lips. "Easy there," Eli said, supporting her head as her eyes fluttered open. They were gray-green, like sage after rain, and filled with confusion and fear. "Where?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "McKenna Ranch. You collapsed by my barn." He held the cup of broth to her lips. "Drink this, slowly." Clara sipped obediently, the warm liquid bringing color back to her cheeks. Her eyes darted around the rough room, taking in the bare walls, the men's boots by the door, and finally settling on Eli's face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trespass. I was looking for shelter." "Storm caught you." It wasn't a question. Eli studied her face, noting the refined features despite the gaunt cheeks. This wasn't some saloon girl or drifter. "You got a name?" "Clara Green." She struggled to sit up straighter, clutching the blankets. "From Missouri. I was supposed to—" Her voice broke, and she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "Mail-order bride?" Eli guessed, having seen enough of them pass through Sage Hollow. The hope in their eyes when they stepped off the stage, the despair when they discovered they'd been swindled. Clara nodded miserably, Mr. Thomas Hartley, but he's dead, and I have nothing." The words tumbled out along with her tears. "I sold everything to come here. The station master said there's no work for women like me, except—" She couldn't finish. "Big Nose Kate's," Eli supplied grimly. He'd seen it before. Desperate women with no options, forced into lives they never imagined. "How long since you ate? Real food, not stage stop slop." Clara looked away. 3 days. Maybe 4. Eli swore under his breath. He heated more broth and found some biscuits, watching as she ate with careful desperation, trying not to appear greedy but clearly starved. When she finished, he sat back on a wooden crate, considering his options. "You can stay here tonight," he said finally. "Tomorrow, we'll figure something out. Maybe one of the ranchers needs a cook, or they won't hire me." Clara's voice held a bitter certainty. "I tried every shop in town. A woman alone with no references and no money. They all assumed I was—" She wrapped the blanket tighter. "I'm not that kind of woman, Mr. McKenna." "Didn't say you were." Eli stood abruptly. "Get some rest. I'll check on you in the morning." But sleep eluded Clara that night. She lay in the narrow bunk, listening to coyotes howl in the distance, wondering what would become of her. Eli McKenna had shown her more kindness than anyone since she'd left Missouri, but she couldn't impose on him beyond tonight. Pride was all she had left. Dawn came with a knock on the door. Clara had managed to dry her dress by the stove and make herself somewhat presentable, though the mud stains remained. She opened the door to find Eli holding a basket. "Breakfast," he said simply, setting it on the rough table. "Cookie makes extra." The basket contained fresh eggs, bacon, biscuits with butter, and coffee that smelled like heaven. Clara tried to eat slowly, with dignity, but hunger won. Eli sat on the crate again, drinking his own coffee and watching her with those unreadable gray eyes. "I can work," Clara said suddenly. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes, 10 chickens. I know I don't look like much now, but I'm a hard worker. If you could just give me a chance to prove—" "Already got Cookie for the meals, and my mother oversees the house." Eli's tone wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. "But I'll ask around. Tom Morrison over at the Double Bar might need help." Over the next days, Clara threw herself into making herself useful. She rose before dawn to help Cookie with breakfast, mended every torn shirt she could find, and even helped repair worn tack in the barn. The ranch hands, Miguel, an old vaquero who'd been with the McKennas for 20 years, and young Billy Summers, treated her with cautious respect. It was on the 4th day that everything changed. Clara was hanging laundry when a carriage rolled up the drive, black, lacquered with brass fittings that gleamed in the sun. She recognized the type, wealth from back east, as out of place here as an orchid in a cactus patch. The woman who stepped out was everything Clara wasn't. Lila Cartwright stood tall and elegant in a traveling suit of burgundy wool, every auburn hair perfectly arranged beneath a fashionable hat. Her porcelain skin showed no sign of sun or hardship, and her gloved hands had never known work. "You there?" Lila called imperiously. "Girl, where is Mr. McKenna?" Clara dropped a wet shirt back in the basket. "He's in the north pasture. Miss should be back by—" "And who exactly are you?" Lila's eyes swept over Clara's patched dress and work-reddened hands with undisguised contempt. I'm helping with the washing, miss." "Indeed." Lila's perfectly shaped lips curved in a cold smile. "How very industrious. I wasn't aware the McKenna Ranch had taken to hiring strays." Before Clara could respond, Dorothy McKenna emerged from the main house. "Miss Cartwright, how wonderful to finally meet you. Please, come in for tea. I'm sure Eli will be along shortly." As the two women swept into the house, Clara heard Lila's carrying voice. "Mrs. McKenna, I'm rather concerned about the class of help you're employing." That creature by the laundry looked positively disreputable. Clara's cheeks burned, but she forced herself to continue with the washing. She was hanging the last shirt when Eli rode in, dusty and tired from moving cattle. He dismounted near the laundry line, and Clara saw his face harden when he spotted the fancy carriage. "She's here," Clara said quietly. "Miss Cartwright, your mother took her inside." Eli's jaw tightened. "Wonderful." He started toward the house, then paused. "You don't have to call me Mr. McKenna. Eli's fine." "I couldn't—" "It's my name." He gave her a look she couldn't interpret. "You're not a servant here. Clara, you're a guest who's helping out." The distinction mattered more than Clara could say. She watched him stride toward the house, squaring his shoulders as if preparing for battle. Through the window, she could see the two women in the parlor, Lila gesturing animatedly while Dorothy poured tea from the good china. That evening, Clara ate in the kitchen with Cookie in the hands, listening to the stilted conversation drifting from the dining room. Lila's cultured voice dominated, discussing Boston society, the latest fashions, her father's banking concerns. Eli's responses were monosyllabic. Later, as Clara crossed the yard to the bunkhouse, she encountered Eli on the porch, smoking a rare cigarette and staring at the stars. "Congratulations on your engagement," she said softly, not knowing what else to say. Eli's laugh was harsh. "There's no engagement. Won't be either, no matter what my mother hopes." He flicked the cigarette into the darkness. "That woman looks at this land like it's something to be conquered and tamed, molded into her idea of civilization. She'd have us serving tea at 4 and hosting garden parties while the ranch fell apart. She's very beautiful." Clara offered, "So's a rattlesnake, from a distance." Eli turned to look at her. "I found you 3 ranchers who might hire you. We'll ride out tomorrow, see what they offer." Clara's heart sank, though she kept her expression neutral. "Thank you. That's very kind. It's practical," Eli corrected. But something in his eyes suggested it was more than that, something he wasn't ready to name. The morning Eli discovered Clara had gone, frost covered the ground like shattered glass. He'd risen early to saddle the horses for their trip to the neighboring ranches, only to find the bunkhouse empty, the narrow bed neatly made, and a note on the rough table. "Mr. McKenna, thank you for your kindness. I cannot burden you further." Fury, hot and unexpected, surged through Eli. He crumpled the note in his fist, then smoothed it out again, staring at her careful script. Damn fool woman. Leaving in the night like a thief when he'd been trying to help her. The temperature had dropped below freezing. She could be anywhere. Could be... "Miguel!" Eli barked, startling the old vaquero who was feeding the horses. "Saddle Tempest, now!" "Si, patron. Something wrong. Miss Clara's gone." Eli was already strapping on his gun belt, a precaution he rarely took for town visits. "Headed to town, most likely, in this cold." Miguel's weathered face creased with concern. "That little señorita, she got too much pride and not enough sense. You want I should come?" "No. Handle the morning chores." Eli swung into the saddle as soon as Miguel tightened the last strap. "If my mother asks, I'm checking fence lines." The ride to Sage Hollow had never seemed longer. Eli pushed Tempest hard, scanning the frost-covered sage for any sign of Clara. The wind cut through his coat like wire, and he wondered how she was faring in that thin dress and worn shawl. Stubborn, prideful, foolish woman, traits that in another context he might admire, but now only fed his anger. He found her at the abandoned Jameson place, a homestead that had failed 3 summers back when the well went dry. She'd taken shelter in what remained of the soddy, a half-collapsed structure that offered little protection from the wind. Eli spotted her through a gap in the wall, huddled in the corner, her lips blue with cold. "Of all the damn fool things!" Eli growled, dismounting and storming into the soddy. "You trying to freeze to death?" Clara looked up, her gray-green eyes wide with surprise and something else. Shame? "How did you—" "Doesn't matter how." Eli shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, his hands lingering a moment on her arms. She was shaking like a spooked colt. "What matters is you nearly killed yourself running off in the night. I couldn't stay." Her teeth chattered between words. Miss Cartwright saw me in your kitchen yesterday evening. She called me. Clara's voice broke. I won't be the cause of gossip that could harm your reputation. To hell with my reputation. The vehemence in his voice surprised them both. Eli pulled her to her feet, keeping his hands on her arms when she swayed. And to hell with Lila Cartwright. You think I care what that Eastern Peacock says? Your mother cares. The ranch. The ranch is mine. Eli's gray eyes blazed. I decide who stays and who goes. And right now, you're coming back with me before you catch your death. Clara tried to pull away, but her strength was gone. I can't. Don't you see? A single woman staying on your property, eating at your table. People will talk. They'll say I'm your... She couldn't finish the sentence. Let them talk. Eli scooped her into his arms as easily as he had that first night. I've heard worse. Put me down, Clara protested, but her arms went around his neck instinctively as he carried her to his horse. Not a chance. He settled her in front of him on Tempest, keeping one arm secure around her waist. You want to leave? Fine, but you'll do it proper. In daylight. With money in your pocket and somewhere safe to go. Not skulking off in the night to freeze in some abandoned soddy. The ride back was silent, except for the rhythm of hooves on frozen ground. Clara sat rigid in his arms at first, but gradually the warmth of his body and the steady motion of the horse made her relax against his chest. Eli found himself noticing things he shouldn't. The way her hair smelled of lye soap and lavender. How perfectly she fit in the circle of his arms. The trust implicit in how she let her head rest against his shoulder. Back at the ranch, he carried her straight to the main house, ignoring her weak protests. His mother emerged from the parlor, Lila at her heels, both women's eyes widening at the sight. Elijah McKenna. Dorothy's voice could have etched glass. What is the meaning of Miss Clara took ill? Eli said curtly, not slowing his stride toward the stairs. She needs warming and rest. Send up hot water and soup. You cannot bring that woman into this house. Lila's voice rose shrilly. It's completely improper. What will people say? Eli paused at the foot of the stairs, turning to fix Lila with a stare that made her step back. They'll say I didn't let a woman freeze to death for the sake of propriety, if that offends your delicate sensibilities. Miss Cartwright, you're free to leave. He didn't wait for a response, taking the stairs two at a time. The room he chose had been Sam's, closed since the funeral, but the warmest in the house with its southern exposure. Eli laid Clara on the bed, then built up the fire until the room glowed with heat. You shouldn't have done that, Clara whispered, watching him work. Your mother, Miss Cartwright, will survive the scandal. Eli pulled a chair close to the bed. Now stop talking and rest. Cookie's bringing soup. But it was Eli who carried up the tray himself, finding Cookie conveniently busy with dinner preparations. He fed Clara the hot broth spoonful by spoonful, ignoring her embarrassed protests that she could manage herself. Your hands are still shaking, he pointed out, unless you want soup all over Sam's quilt. Sam? Clara's eyes went to the carved wooden horse on the dresser, the books lined neatly on their shelf. A young man's room, frozen in time. My brother. Eli's voice went flat. Died 2 years back. I'm sorry. Clara's hand found his, a brief touch that sent heat through him like lightning. I shouldn't be in his room. It's just a room. But Eli's throat felt tight. Sam would have liked you. He had a soft spot for strays, too. They sat in silence as the fire crackled and the afternoon light slanted through the windows. Eli found himself studying Clara's face, noting the determined chin, the delicate arch of her brows, the way her eyes changed from gray to green depending on the light. When had she become beautiful to him? Not in the conventional way Lila was beautiful, all polish and perfection. Clara's beauty was quieter, harder won, like a wildflower that bloomed despite drought and wind. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Miguel stood in the doorway, hat in hand. Patron, there's trouble in town. That gambler, Jack Henley, he's stirring up talk about the señorita. Says she tried to solicit him behind the saloon. Eli's hands clenched into fists. He's lying. See, of course. But people listen to lies when they want to believe them. Miguel's eyes flicked to Clara with sympathy. Thought you should know. After Miguel left, Clara turned her face to the wall. You see? It's already starting. I should never have come here. Stop. Eli caught her chin, turning her to face him. Jack Henley's a drunk and a liar. Nobody with sense believes him. But they'll believe I'm your mistress if I stay here. Tears traced silver paths down her cheeks. I can't do that to you. Eli, you've been nothing but kind. Kindness has nothing to do with it. The words came out rougher than he intended. Eli released her chin but couldn't make himself move back. You think I give a damn what this town thinks? They stood by and watched while Sam burned. Their good opinion isn't worth the dirt on my boots. But the ranch, your mother's standing, will survive. Eli stood abruptly, needing distance from the temptation of her tears. You're staying, Clara, here, in this house, until you're well and we find you proper employment. That's final. He strode from the room before she could argue, nearly colliding with his mother in the hallway. Dorothy's face was stone. You've lost your mind, she said quietly. Lila's packing to leave. This marriage was our chance to secure the ranch's future, to restore our good name. Our name doesn't need restoring. Eli kept walking, his mother following. And the ranch doesn't need Cartwright money. It needs an heir. Dorothy snapped. You're 30 years old, Elijah. If you won't marry properly, what happens to everything your father built? Eli stopped at his study door, turning to face her. That's my concern, not yours. That girl is nobody. No family, no money, no connections. She's not even pretty. She's got more courage in her little finger than Lila Cartwright has in her whole body. The defense came without thought. And she's under my protection. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Dorothy's eyes widened at the implication. You can't mean to... Eli, no, I won't have it. Then you're free to return to your sister in Denver. Eli entered his study and closed the door in his mother's shocked face. That night, sleep eluded him. Eli stood at his window, watching clouds race across the moon, thinking about green-gray eyes and the weight of a small woman in his arms. He'd told himself he was being charitable, Christian, doing what Sam would have done. But the truth was more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. He was falling for Clara Green. The realization should have sent him running. He'd built walls around his heart after Sam's death, thick walls mortared with anger and loss. No woman had breached them. Not the pretty rancher's daughters who fluttered their fans at socials. Not the widow Harrison who'd made her interest plain. Yet somehow a half-starved mail-order bride with patched skirts and too much pride had walked right through those walls like they were made of paper. A sound from the hallway made him turn. Clara stood in the doorway, wrapped in one of Sam's robes, her hair loose around her shoulders. I couldn't sleep, she said softly. I wanted to thank you for everything and to say goodbye properly this time. You're not leaving. Eli? He crossed the room in 3 strides, catching her shoulders. No. Whatever argument you've prepared, whatever noble sacrifice you think you need to make. No. They stood frozen. The air between them charged like the moment before lightning strikes. Clara's eyes searched his face, looking for something she must have found because she swayed toward him. Just a fraction. It was enough. Eli pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was nothing like the chaste pecks he'd shared with properly courted women. This was fire and desperation. 2 years of frozen emotions thawing in an instant. Clara made a soft sound, surprise or surrender, and her hands fisted in his shirt. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Eli rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he said roughly. Not for charity or propriety or any damn thing, but this. Stay because I want you here. Clara's eyes shimmered with tears. I'm nobody. Eli, just like your mother said, you deserve... You... His hands cupped her face. I deserve you, if you'll have me. The kiss she gave him then was answer enough. The morning after their kiss, Clara pulled back behind walls of her own. She rose before dawn. Returning to the bunkhouse despite Eli's insistence she remain in Sam's room, she threw herself into work with desperate energy, scrubbing floors that were already clean. mending clothes that barely needed repair, helping Cookie until the old man practically chased her from his kitchen. "I'm not your kept woman," she told Eli when he cornered her in the barn where she was unnecessarily reorganizing the tack. "One kiss doesn't change that." "Doesn't it?" Eli's eyes held a heat that made her hands tremble on the bridle she was cleaning. "Clara, people are already talking." She focused on the leather, rubbing it with more force than needed. "Miguel told me what they're saying in town. That gambler's lies are spreading like wildfire. Let them spread." Eli moved closer, caging her against the tack wall. "I told you I don't care." "Well, I do." Clara ducked under his arm, putting distance between them. "I've got nothing left but my reputation. Eli, I won't have folks saying I traded my virtue for a roof over my head." The hurt that flashed across his face made her heart clench, but she stood firm. She had to. The kiss they'd shared had shown her exactly how easy it would be to fall completely, irrevocably in love with this man. And that way lay nothing but heartbreak for a nobody from Missouri. For 3 days they danced around each other, Eli growing more frustrated while Clara grew more distant. Then Lila Cartwright returned. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon with 2 purposes: to deliver a scathing set-down to Eli for his rudeness and to spread poison about Clara throughout Sage Hollow. By evening, the town buzzed with scandal. The Eastern lady's version of events painted Clara as a calculating fortune hunter who'd used feminine wiles to ensnare the grieving rancher. Dorothy McKenna, still smarting from her son's rejection of the match she'd arranged, did nothing to quell the rumors. If anything, her tight-lipped disapproval whenever Clara's name arose only fueled the fire. The breaking point came at the Saturday market. Clara had ventured into town for fabric, hoping to replace her worn dress with something respectable. She'd saved every penny Eli insisted on paying her for her work, determined to stand on her own feet. She was examining a bolt of simple brown calico when she heard the whispers start. Women she'd nodded to on the street now turned their backs, pulling their skirts aside as if her poverty might be contagious. Behind the counter, Mrs. Patterson's face had gone cold. "I'm afraid that fabric's already spoken for," the shopkeeper said loudly. "Oh." Clara set down the bolt. "What about the blue?" "That's reserved too. In fact, all our fabric is reserved." Mrs. Patterson's smile was sharp as glass. "Perhaps you should try elsewhere, though I doubt any respectable establishment will serve your kind." Clara's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin high. "My money's as good as anyone's." "Your money?" Lila Cartwright's voice cut through the shop like a whip. She stood near the ribbons, flanked by 2 other well-dressed women. "Did you earn it on your back, Miss Green? Or did you simply steal it from poor Mr. McKenna while playing the innocent?" The shop went silent, every eye fixed on Clara, waiting to see her crumble. She thought of Eli, of his fierce protectiveness, of the kiss that had branded her soul. Then she thought of what association with her was doing to his name. "I earned it honestly," Clara said quietly, "which is more than some can say." Lila's perfect features twisted. "How dare you? How dare I what? Work for my keep? Refuse to be bullied by someone who's never known a day's hardship?" Clara stepped closer, her voice gaining strength. "You call me names because I came here with nothing, because I was foolish enough to believe in a promise. But at least I'm not so empty inside that I need to tear others down to feel tall. You little—" Lila raised her hand. Clara caught her wrist. "Touch me and I'll hit back. I may be poor, Miss Cartwright, but I'm not weak. No, you're just a common little tramp who—" The shop door slammed open. Eli stood framed in the doorway, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud. His eyes took in the scene, Clara facing down Lila, the watching women, the tension thick as smoke. "Miss Cartwright," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "I believe you were leaving town today." "Eli, this creature insulted me. This lady defended herself against your harassment." Eli moved to Clara's side, his hand settling possessively on her lower back. "Which ends now?" Dorothy McKenna pushed through the crowd. "Elijah, you're making a spectacle." "No, Mother. You are." Eli's gaze swept the gathered women. All of you, gossiping like crows over carrion, judging a woman whose only crime was trusting the wrong person. His eyes found Lila. Get out of my town. Your town, Lila laughed shrilly. You think you own Sage Hollow? I own enough of it. Eli's smile was dangerous. The bank, for instance, holds the mortgage on your hotel, the livery where your carriage is kept, the restaurant where you take your meals. Would you like to test how far my influence extends? Lila paled. You wouldn't dare. Try me. The moment stretched taut before Lila turned on her heel, sweeping from the shop with what dignity she could muster. The other women began to disperse, suddenly finding urgent business elsewhere. Are you hurt? Eli asked Clara quietly, his thumb stroking her spine. No, but her voice shook. Eli, you shouldn't have. We're leaving. He guided her toward the door, pausing only to look back at Mrs. Patterson. Send your best fabric to the ranch, all of it. Miss Green will be needing a complete wardrobe. Outside, Clara tried to pull away. I can't accept. You can and you will. Eli lifted her onto his horse before she could protest further, swinging up behind her. And before you start about your reputation, there's something you should know. It's too late to save it. What do you mean? I mean Jack Henley and 3 of his friends are about to learn what happens when they spread lies about you. His arms tightened around her. Miguel and Billy are having a conversation with them right now. Eli, no, violence won't solve. Sometimes it's the only thing men like that understand. His breath stirred her hair. No one speaks ill of what's mine. I'm not yours, Clara whispered, even as her body betrayed her by relaxing into his embrace. Aren't you? His voice dropped to a rumble. Then why did you defend my name in there? Why do you work yourself to exhaustion trying to prove you're not taking advantage? Why did you kiss me back like your life depended on it? Clara had no answer that wouldn't damn her further. They rode in silence until they reached a rise overlooking the ranch. Eli reined in Tempest, letting the horse rest while they gazed down at the sprawling valley. My father built this place from nothing, he said eventually. Came out here with a pregnant wife, 2 horses, and a dream. Fought weather, Indians, cattle thieves, and nature itself to carve out something lasting. His arm shifted, turning Clara so he could see her face. Know what he told me before he died? Clara shook her head. He said the land doesn't care about your bloodline or your past. It only cares if you're strong enough to hold it. Eli's thumb traced her cheekbone. You're stronger than any woman I've known. Clara Green, strong enough for this land. Strong enough for me, if you'd stop running. Your mother will come around or she won't. Her choice. His gray eyes bored into hers. I'm done living for other people's expectations, done pretending I don't want you. Want, Clara repeated bitterly. Yes, men want all sorts of things. Then they take them and move on, leaving women like me ruined. Is that what you think? Eli dismounted, pulling her down after him, backing her against a boulder. That I'm some rotten bull looking to mount you and walk away? The crude words should have shocked her. Instead, they sent heat flooding through her veins. Aren't you? No. His hands framed her face. I'm a man looking at forever and seeing your face. I'm a fool who thought his heart died with his brother until you showed up half dead in my mud. His forehead touched hers. I'm asking you to marry me. Clara. The world stopped. Clara stared up at him, searching for the joke, the trick, the catch. You... what? Marry me. His hand slid to her shoulders. Not because you need protection or I need an heir, because I can't imagine waking up another day without you beside me. Eli, I'm nobody. You're everything. He kissed her then, hard and desperate. Say yes. Clara's knees buckled. Only his arms kept her upright as she fought between hope and terror. The town will never accept. To hell with the town. Your mother, to hell with her too. You'll regret it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. When the novelty wears off, when you realize what you've sacrificed, the only thing I'll regret is if you say no. Eli wiped her tears with his thumbs. I'm not Sam. Clara, I don't need everyone's approval. I just need you. A sob escaped her. I don't even have a proper dress. Mrs. Patterson's sending fabric, remember? I can't cook as well as Cookie. You cook fine. I don't know anything about running a ranch house. You'll learn. I'm scared, she finally admitted, the words barely a whisper. So am I, Eli confessed. Terrified, actually, but I'm more scared of living without you. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Take a chance on me. Clara, on us, on this life. I swear I'll spend every day making sure you don't regret it. Clara looked into his face, this hard, lonely man who'd shown her more kindness than she'd ever known, who saw her as more than a mail-order bride in rags, who offered not just protection but partnership, not just want but love. Yes, she breathed. The smile that broke across Eli's face was like sunrise after endless night. He kissed her again, lifting her off her feet, spinning her in a circle that made her laugh despite her tears. But even as joy flooded through her, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that their trials were far from over. The town's hostility, Dorothy's disapproval, the scandal that would follow. They'd face it all. For now, though, she let herself be held by the man who'd chosen her above all others, there on the rise overlooking the land that would be theirs. The wind carried the scent of sage and possibility, and for the first time since stepping off that stage, Clara Green believed she might actually belong somewhere. She just prayed their love would be strong enough to weather the storm she could see building on the horizon. The scandal erupted like wildfire through dry grass. Within hours of Eli's public confrontation with Lila, the town split into factions, those who thought he'd lost his mind, and those who quietly admired his defiance. But admiration didn't translate to acceptance, and Clara felt the weight of every stare, every whispered conversation that died when she entered a room. 3 days after Eli's proposal, Dorothy McKenna played her final card. Clara was in the kitchen garden, trying to salvage what remained after the early frost, when she heard the carriages, not one, but 3, rolling up the drive with the pompous certainty of people who knew their own importance. Through the kitchen window, she watched Dorothy greet the visitors, Judge Theodore Blackwood, Reverend Paul Morrison, and Mayor Charles Whitman, the town's trinity of moral authority. Miss Green. Cookie appeared at her elbow, his weathered face grave. Might be best if you make yourself scarce. That's a hanging jury if I ever seen one. But Clara squared her shoulders. Running won't solve anything. She was washing her hands when Dorothy appeared in the kitchen doorway. You're wanted in the parlor. The walk felt like a march to the gallows. The 3 men sat like carrion birds, black-suited and solemn. Eli stood by the fireplace, his jaw tight with controlled anger. Miss Green, Judge Blackwood didn't offer her a seat. We've come about a serious matter. Charges have been filed against you. Clara's knees threatened to buckle. Charges? Fraud. Misrepresentation. Attempting to enter into a marriage contract under false pretenses. The judge's eyes were cold as winter stone. The complaint states you came to Sage Hollow claiming to be a mail-order bride for Thomas Hartley, knowing he was deceased. That's a lie. The words burst out before Clara could stop them. I had no idea. Can you prove that? Mayor Whitman leaned forward. Do you have the original correspondence? Witnesses to your character? Clara's hands clenched in her skirts. The letters had been destroyed in the rain that first night, and she knew no one in Wyoming who could vouch for her. I have nothing but my word, the word of a desperate woman with no money and no options. Reverend Morrison's voice dripped false sympathy. Who then attached herself to Mr. McKenna through questionable means. Enough. Eli stepped forward. Clara's done nothing wrong. Your judgment in this matter is compromised. Judge Blackwood stood, which is why we're prepared to offer a solution. Miss Green leaves Sage Hollow immediately, and the charges disappear. She can take the eastbound stage tomorrow. We'll even provide the fare. Get out! Eli's voice was deadly quiet. Dorothy touched his arm. Eli, be reasonable. They're offering her a way to leave with dignity. They're offering to run her out of town like a criminal. He shook off his mother's hand. Clara goes nowhere. Then she'll stand trial. The judge gathered his hat. And if convicted, which seems likely, given the evidence, she'll serve 6 months in the territorial prison. After the men left, the silence was deafening. Dorothy looked between her son and Clara with satisfaction poorly concealed. You see, this is what comes of defying propriety. But it's not too late. Send her away. Eli, find a suitable bride, and all will be forgiven. You arranged this. Understanding dawned in Eli's eyes. You went to them, spun this story. I did what any mother would do to save her son from ruin. Dorothy lifted her chin. That girl is poison. Eli, can't you see? Since she arrived, you've alienated the town's best families, threatened respectable businesses, brawled in the streets like common riffraff. I defended what's mine. She's not yours. Dorothy's composure cracked. She's a nothing, a nobody who saw an opportunity and took it, and now she'll drag you down with her unless you see sense. Clara couldn't bear it any more. She's right. Both McKennas turned to stare at her. Your mother's right. Clara repeated, her voice steady despite the pain tearing through her chest. I am poison. Everything I touch turns to ash. She met Eli's eyes. I won't let you throw away everything for me. I'll take their offer. Leave tomorrow. Like hell. Eli crossed to her in 2 strides, gripping her arms. You promised to marry me. That was before nothing. You think I care about their threats? Their trial? His hands moved to cup her face. Let them try to take you. They'll have to go through me. Eli? He silenced her with a kiss that tasted of desperation and promise. When they broke apart, he kept her close. We're getting married. Tonight, Miguel can ride for Reverend Jackson over in Cedar Ridge. He's not under the town's thumb. The law requires posting bans, Dorothy began. Not in the territories, not with a willing minister. Eli's smile was sharp. You taught me that, Mother, when you explained how quickly I could marry Lila if needed. Dorothy went white. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. But Clara pulled away, shaking her head. No, I won't have you marry me out of spite or to prove a point. If we marry, it should be for love. Not as some act of rebellion. You think I don't love you? Eli caught her hand, pressing it to his chest where his heart hammered. You think this is about proving something to them? Clara, I'd marry you in a barn with only the horses as witnesses if that's what it took. Then wait. Clara's eyes filled with tears. If you truly love me, wait. Let me face this trial. Let me clear my name properly, not run from it into marriage like I'm guilty of something. Clara, please. She touched his face. I've run my whole life. From poverty, from shame, from people's judgment. I came west running toward a dream that turned to dust. But I won't run anymore. Not from this. Not if it means starting our marriage under a cloud. Eli's jaw worked. You could go to prison. Then you'll know where to find me when I get out. This is ridiculous. Dorothy threw up her hands. The girl's giving you an escape. Eli, take it. Get out. Eli didn't look at his mother. Pack your things and get out of my house. You're choosing her over your own mother? I'm choosing love over manipulation, courage over cowardice. He finally looked at Dorothy. Sam would be ashamed of you. The slap echoed through the parlor. Dorothy's handprint bloomed red on Eli's cheek, but he didn't flinch. How dare you invoke his name? Her voice shook. Everything I've done has been for this family. For the legacy he died protecting. Sam died because nobody would help him. Eli's voice was ice. Because people like you cared more about appearances than action. And now you're doing the same to Clara. Dorothy gathered her dignity like armor. You have until morning to see sense. If that woman is still here when I return from town, I'll testify against her myself. She swept out, leaving Clara and Eli alone with the weight of what was coming. You should let me go, Clara whispered. Your mother, the ranch, will survive or they won't. Eli pulled her into his arms. but I won't survive losing you." They stood holding each other as shadows lengthened across the parlor floor. Tomorrow would bring the trial, the judgment of people who'd decided her guilt before she ever spoke. But for now, Clara let herself rest in the circle of Eli's arms, drawing strength from his solid presence. That night, Eli moved her things back to Sam's room, posting Miguel outside the door. "For your reputation," he said with bitter irony. "Wouldn't want anyone saying we acted improper before your trial." Clara touched the bruise his mother's slap had left. "I'm sorry. Don't." He caught her hand. "Don't apologize for their narrow minds." Sleep eluded her. Clara stood at the window, watching clouds race across the stars, praying for strength. Below, she could see Eli's shadow pacing the porch, standing guard over what he'd claimed as his. The trial was set for noon. By dawn, wagons were already rolling into town. Ranchers and their families come to witness the spectacle. Clara dressed in her best patched dress, pinning her hair severely back. If she was going to face judgment, she'd do it with dignity. Eli waited at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in his Sunday suit. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." Clara took his offered arm. "Whatever happens, know that I love you." The courthouse was packed, the air thick with perfume and righteousness. Judge Blackwood presided like Solomon preparing to split the baby. The prosecutor, a thin man imported from Cheyenne, laid out the case with dramatic flair: the deceived town, the calculated seduction, the threat to moral order. Clara sat straight-backed, Eli beside her despite the judge's protest that he wasn't her legal counsel. "I'll stand with her," Eli said firmly. "Law or no law." When Clara's turn came to speak, she stood on unsteady legs. The hostile faces blurred together, but she found Eli's eyes and drew strength. "I came to Sage Hollow with hope," she began, her voice carrying clear through the room. "Hope for a new life, a fresh start, a chance to belong somewhere. I was deceived, yes, but I deceived no one. I've worked honestly for every meal, every roof over my head. You attached yourself to Mr. McKenna," someone shouted from the gallery. "He saved my life." Clara lifted her chin. "And yes, I fell in love with him. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty. But I never lied, never schemed, never took what wasn't freely given." "You have no proof," the prosecutor interjected. "No witnesses to your character, no evidence of your claims." "I'll witness." The voice came from the back of the room. An elderly woman pushed through the crowd, Martha Jameson, whose failed homestead had sheltered Clara that cold night. "I know this girl," Martha said firmly. "Found her near frozen at my old place, and she'd scratched a message in the dirt. Thank you for the shelter. We'll send payment when able." "What kind of scheming woman leaves IOUs in abandoned soddies?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Then another voice. "She mended my boy's shirt for free." And another. "Helped my wife with the washing when she was poorly." One by one, the working people of Sage Hollow, the ones ignored by society's pillars, stood to speak for Clara. Not many, but enough to crack the prosecutor's narrative. Judge Blackwood's face darkened. "Order! This is highly irregular. So is this trial." Eli stood. "A woman's being prosecuted for believing a lie and accepting charity. If that's illegal, half the territory should be in chains." The judge's gavel cracked. "Mr. McKenna, you're out of order. This whole proceeding's out of order." Eli faced the crowd. "You want to know the truth? Clara Green's crime is making me remember what it feels like to be alive, to care about something more than land and cattle and the almighty opinion of people who wouldn't cross the street to save a dying man." He turned to Clara, his voice carrying to every corner. "I love this woman. I'll marry her the second this farce ends. And if that bothers you, if her poverty offends your delicate sensibilities, then stay away from my ranch, because she'll be its mistress, and I'll be damned if I'll let anyone make her feel small again." The courtroom erupted. Judge Blackwood hammered for order, threatening contempt charges, but the damage was done. Eli's declaration had shifted something in the air. When the verdict came, it was grudging. Insufficient evidence to convict, not innocent, but not guilty enough to imprison. Clara was free to go. Outside, in the thin November sunshine. Clara swayed on her feet. Eli caught her, holding her steady. "It's over," he murmured. But Clara saw Dorothy McKenna across the street, her face a mask of fury, and knew the battle had only begun. The morning after the trial, Dorothy McKenna made good on her threat. Her belongings were loaded onto a hired wagon before the sun cleared the mountains, and she left without a word to her son. Clara watched from the kitchen window as the woman who should have been her mother-in-law departed in rigid silence, back straight as a fence post. "Let her go," Eli said behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Pride's all she has left now." But the damage was deeper than one woman's departure. Over the following days, the Circle M felt the town's judgment in a dozen ways. Supplies ordered from Henderson's store were mysteriously delayed. The bank manager hemmed and hawed about the loan Eli needed for winter feed. Even the traveling preacher found reasons to avoid the ranch on his circuit. "We could leave," Clara suggested one evening as they sat before the fire. "Start fresh somewhere else. California, maybe, or Oregon. This is our land." Eli's voice held iron. "My father's buried on that hill, and Sam beside him. I won't be run off by small-minded hypocrites." So they stayed, and slowly, carefully, began building something new. Without Dorothy's oppressive presence, the ranch house felt lighter. Clara threw open windows that had been shut for years, aired out rooms that smelled of grief and old roses. She couldn't cook as well as Cookie, but she learned, burning only half as many biscuits as the week before. The first snow came early, thick flakes that turned the world white and clean. Eli taught Clara to ride properly, not just perch on a horse, but move with it like the animal was part of her body. They rode the fence lines together, checking for breaks, moving cattle to sheltered valleys. "You're getting better," Eli noted as she successfully guided her mare through a narrow draw. "Natural seat for it." Clara flushed with pleasure. These moments of praise meant more than any fancy dress or social acceptance. Out here, with just the sky and the snow and Eli's quiet presence, she could almost forget the town's hostility. But isolation took its toll. By December, they were down to just Miguel and Billy for hands. The others had drifted away, unwilling to work for a ranch under social exile. The work was brutal. Dawn to past dusk, trying to keep the cattle alive through blizzards that howled down from the mountains like vengeful spirits. It was during one such storm that everything changed. Clara woke to Eli's restless movements, his skin burning with fever. He'd been coughing for days, dismissing her concern. But now his breath came in rattling gasps that sent fear shooting through her. "Just need rest," he muttered, trying to rise. The cattle can wait." Clara pressed him back down, her hand cool against his burning forehead. "You're sick." Eli, really sick. By noon, despite her efforts with willow bark tea and cold compresses, the fever had worsened. Eli drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling for Sam, sometimes reaching for Clara with desperate hands. "Can't lose you too," he mumbled. "Can't go through that again." Clara faced a terrible choice. The nearest doctor was in Sage Hollow, but would he come? Would anyone help them now? "I'll go," Billy offered, young face grave beneath his hat. "Storm's letting up some. They might not listen to you." Clara pulled on her cloak with shaking hands. "I'll go." "Senora, no," Miguel protested. "The town, they'll help or they won't." Clara's jaw set with determination. "But I won't let him die for their spite." The ride to town was a nightmare of wind and snow. Clara's mare struggled through drifts that reached her belly. And more than once, Clara thought they'd both perish in the white wasteland. But she pressed on, driven by the memory of Eli's fever-bright eyes. She pounded on Dr. Holcomb's door with frozen fists. His housekeeper answered, face shuddering when she recognized Clara. "Please." Clara gasped through chattering teeth. "Eli's dying. He needs help." "The doctor doesn't make calls to your kind," the woman began. "What kind is that?" Clara pushed past her into the warmth. "The kind who love too much, the kind who won't bow to your petty judgments." Her voice rose, fierce with desperation. "My husband is dying, and by God, the doctor will come or I'll drag him by his hair." Dr. Holcomb appeared in his nightshirt, spectacles askew. "What's this commotion?" "Please." Clara's fierceness crumbled into tears. "I know the town hates us. I know we're outcasts. But Eli never hurt anyone except to defend me. Don't let him pay for my sins. Please!" The old doctor studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Hattie, pack my bag and get my heavy coat." "Doctor," his housekeeper protested. "You can't mean to—" "I took an oath," he said quietly, "to heal the sick. It didn't say anything about only the socially acceptable sick." The ride back was even worse, the doctor struggling to keep pace with Clara's desperate speed. But they made it, and Clara nearly wept with relief when she saw lamplight still burning in the ranch house. Dr. Holcomb worked through the night, mixing medicines, applying poultices, fighting the fever with everything in his arsenal. Clara never left Eli's side, holding his hand, talking to him about their future, the children they'd have, the roses she'd plant come spring, the life they'd build despite everything. "Stubborn man," the doctor muttered as dawn broke and Eli's fever finally began to ease. "Too stubborn to die, apparently. He has something to live for," Clara said softly, smoothing Eli's damp hair. Dr. Holcomb packed his bag slowly. "You know, I delivered both McKenna boys. Watched them grow up. Sam was the charmer, could talk his way out of any trouble. But Eli—" He glanced at the sleeping rancher. "Eli was always the strong one. Just needed the right reason to remember it." He paused at the door. "You're that reason, Mrs. McKenna." "We're not actually married yet," Clara admitted. "Aren't you?" The doctor's eyes twinkled. "Could have fooled me. I'll send my bill when he's well enough to curse about it." Word of the doctor's visit spread through Sage Hollow like ripples in a pond. Some condemned him for helping the outcasts, but others began to question if Doc Holcomb, pillar of propriety, could bend his principles. Maybe they'd been too hasty in their judgment. The first crack in the town's unified front came from an unexpected source. Sarah Morrison, the banker's wife, arrived at the ranch on a clear January morning. Clara, mucking out stalls, nearly dropped her pitchfork in shock. "Mrs. Morrison?" The elegant woman looked uncomfortable but determined. I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "My daughter Emma. She was one of the mail-order brides who came before you. When she was swindled, when the town turned its back." Sarah's voice caught. "She ended up at Big Nose Kate's. Took her own life last spring." Clara's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry." "You stood up to them." Sarah met her eyes. "You survived what killed my girl. And watching you, seeing your courage, it made me realize I was part of the problem. Silent when I should have spoken." She held out a basket. "It's not much. Some preserves, fresh bread. But I wanted you to know, not everyone in town is against you." After Sarah left, others began to trickle in. Not many, and not openly, but enough. The minister's wife brought fabric. The schoolteacher offered books. Even some of the ranchers' wives, the practical women who valued hard work over bloodlines, began to nod when they passed Clara in town. Eli recovered slowly, chafing at the confinement but forced to rest by Clara's fierce protectiveness. They spent long evenings by the fire, planning for spring, for the future they'd almost lost. "We should get married soon," Eli said one night, pulling her close on the settee. "Properly, in the church, with flowers and all the trimmings." "The church won't have us," Clara reminded him. "Then, under the sky, on the hill where Pa's buried." His lips found her temple. "He'd have liked you. Ma too, before grief twisted her up. I wish I could have known them." Clara turned in his arms. "Do you think she'll ever forgive us?" "Maybe, when she's ready to see past her pride." Eli's hand curved around her face. "But that's her journey. Ours is here." They made love for the first time that night, there before the dying fire with snow falling soft outside. It was nothing like the rough taking Clara had feared in her darker moments, but a gentle claiming that went both ways. Eli worshipped her body like she was something precious, something worthy of reverence, until Clara understood in her bones what it meant to be chosen, to be cherished, to belong to someone completely. Afterward, they lay entwined on the thick rug, watching embers pulse in the grate. "No regrets?" Eli asked softly. Clara traced the scar on his chest, a legacy from some long-ago branding accident. "Only that we can't stay here forever." "Why can't we?" His hand stroked down her back. "Build a wall around the ranch. Keep the world out. Because walls work both ways." Clara propped herself on an elbow to look at him. "And much as I love you, Eli McKenna, we need more than just each other. We need community, friends, a place in the world. Then we'll make one." His eyes held that stubborn light she'd come to love. "However long it takes, we'll make our place." The real test came in February, when rustlers hit 3 ranches in the valley. The Double Bar lost 50 head, the Rocking J 30. When the ranchers gathered to form a posse, Eli rode in uninvited. "My land's next in line," he said simply. "I'm riding with you." Tom Morrison spat tobacco juice. "Don't need help from town pariahs. You need every gun you can get." Eli countered. "Unless your pride's worth more than your cattle." It was old Charlie Brennan who broke the tension. "Man's got a point. Rustlers don't care about social standings." They rode out 20 strong. Eli pointedly ignored by most, but there nonetheless. It was Clara who spotted the smoke from the hidden canyon where the rustlers had made camp. Her sharp eyes trained by months of watching the horizon. "That's gotta be them," she told Miguel, who'd stayed to guard the ranch with her. "See, but the posse, they rode south." Clara was already saddling her mare. "Then we'd better catch them." She rode hard, pushing through thickets that tore at her skirts, following the posse's trail with skills Eli had taught her. When she found them, about to ride into an ambush, she fired her rifle in the air. "It's a trap!" she shouted as heads turned. "The rustlers are behind you, in Skeleton Canyon." Eli reached her first, face thunderous. "What are you doing out here? Saving your stubborn hide?" She quickly explained about the smoke. "They're waiting to pick you off when you ride past." Tom Morrison rode up, scowling. "You expect us to believe?" Gunfire erupted from the rocks ahead, cutting him off. The posse scattered for cover as bullets whined overhead, exactly where they would have been riding. "The woman's right!" Charlie Brennan shouted. "Circle back! Hit them from behind!" The fight was brief but vicious. The rustlers, robbed of their ambush, tried to flee through the canyon Clara had spotted, but the posse was ready now, and within an hour, it was over. 15 rustlers captured, hundreds of cattle recovered. As they rode back, Tom Morrison pulled alongside Clara. "I was wrong," he said gruffly, "about the ambush, about other things too, maybe." It wasn't an apology. Not quite, but it was a beginning. Winter arrived early that year, howling down from the mountains with teeth of ice and claws of wind. By November, snow stood 3 feet deep in the valleys, and the temperature plunged so low that breath froze in the air like tiny crystals of pain. Clara felt the change in her body before she truly understood it, the queasiness in the mornings, the bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure, the way certain smells made her stomach revolt. But it wasn't until she fainted while feeding the chickens that the truth became undeniable. Eli found her sitting in the snow, chickens pecking around her scattered grain, her face white as the ground beneath her. "Clara!" He dropped to his knees beside her, hands checking for injury. "What happened? Are you hurt?" She pressed a hand to her stomach, wonder and terror warring in her chest. "I think I'm with child. Eli?" The expression that crossed his face was something she'd remember forever. Joy so fierce it looked almost like pain, followed immediately by fear that tightened his features. "You're sure?" Clara nodded. "The signs have been there for weeks. I just didn't want to believe. Not now, not when things are so uncertain." Eli gathered her into his arms, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. "Nothing's uncertain. We're having a baby. Our baby." His voice cracked on the words. God, Clara, we're having a baby. But joy couldn't change their circumstances. The Circle M was struggling, down to just Miguel and Billy for hands, the others driven away by the town's continued shunning. Feed was running low. And with the bank still reluctant to extend credit, Eli had been forced to sell off some of their best breeding stock. The blizzard struck in early December, a white wall of fury that trapped them in the house for 3 days. The temperature dropped so low that ice formed on the inside of the windows, and they burned through a week's worth of firewood just to keep from freezing. It was the second night of the storm when Clara's pains began, not the gentle quickening she'd read about in her mother's old journal, but sharp, stabbing agony that doubled her over. "It's too early," she gasped, clutching Eli's hand. "Something's wrong." Terror replaced the cold in Eli's eyes. The nearest doctor was in town. Impossible to reach in this storm. The midwife who served the outlying ranches lived even farther away. "I'll go," Billy volunteered, young face pale but determined. "My horse knows the way. You'll die before you make it a mile," Eli said flatly. "No one's riding in this." For 2 days, Clara fought to keep the baby inside her, while the storm raged and Eli paced like a caged wolf. Cookie made herbal teas from his grandmother's recipes. Miguel prayed in rapid Spanish, and Billy kept the fires burning despite the dwindling wood supply. On the third dawn, with the storm finally breaking, Clara's body surrendered to the inevitable. The baby came too soon, too small, fighting for each tiny breath in Eli's trembling hands. "He's so little," Clara whispered, tears streaming as she cradled their son. No bigger than Eli's palm, but perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair like his father's. "He's a fighter," Eli said fiercely. "Like his mother, he'll make it." They took turns holding him, keeping him warm against their skin, willing their strength into his fragile body. Clara sang lullabies her mother had sung, while Eli told stories of the ranch the boy would grow up on, the horses he'd ride, the legacy he'd inherit. For 12 hours, their son fought. His breath came in little puffs that Clara counted like prayers. But as the sun set on that frozen day, the breathing slowed, stuttered, stopped. "No." Clara clutched him tighter, as if she could hold his spirit in by force of will. "Please, no, please." Eli wrapped them both in his arms, his own tears hot against her hair. "He's gone, sweetheart. Our boy's gone." They named him Samuel, after Eli's brother. It seemed fitting. Another McKenna taken too soon. Another light extinguished before its time. Eli carved a tiny coffin from pine while Clara wrapped their son in the christening gown she'd been embroidering for months. The ground was frozen too hard for burial. They had to wait 3 days for Miguel and Billy to build fires to thaw the earth beside the family plot. 3 days of that tiny coffin sitting in the cold parlor, a reminder of all their broken dreams. The funeral was just the 4 of them, Eli, Clara, Miguel, and Billy, standing in the bitter wind while Eli read from the Bible with a voice that broke on every verse. Clara couldn't speak at all, couldn't do anything but stare at the small mound of earth that covered her heart. The weeks that followed were the darkest of Clara's life. She moved through the days like a ghost, cooking meals she didn't eat, mending clothes with stitches she couldn't see through her tears. At night, she lay rigid beside Eli, afraid that if she let him hold her, she'd shatter into pieces too small to ever reassemble. Eli threw himself into work with desperate energy, leaving before dawn and returning after dark, as if he could outrun grief by exhausting himself. But Clara heard him sometimes in the night, standing by the window, shoulders shaking with the sobs he wouldn't let her see. They were drowning separately when they needed to swim together. It was Miguel who finally intervened. The old vaquero cornered Clara in the kitchen on a gray February morning. "Señora," he said gently, "you are killing each other with this silence. The patron, he bleeds inside where no one can see, and you." He gestured at her hollow cheeks, her trembling hands. "You fade like smoke." "I lost my baby," Clara whispered. "See, and it is a grief beyond words." Miguel's weathered face was kind. "But you have not lost each other? Not yet?" though you are trying very hard to make it so. That night, Clara found Eli in the barn, sitting in Tempest's stall with a bottle of whiskey and 1,000-yard stare. "Drinking won't bring him back," she said softly. Eli's laugh was bitter. "Nothing will bring him back. Nothing brings any of them back." He took another swig. "First Pa, then Sam, now our boy. Everything I touch dies. I'm still here. For how long?" The words came out raw, bleeding. "This land is cursed. Clara, I'm cursed. You should have taken that stage back east when you had the chance." Clara knelt beside him in the straw, taking the bottle and setting it aside. "Look at me," when he wouldn't. She caught his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "We lost our son, not because of curses or sins or anything we did wrong. Sometimes babies come too early. Sometimes life is cruel." Her voice broke. "But losing him doesn't mean we have to lose each other too. I couldn't save him." Eli's eyes were wells of anguish. "I held him and willed him to live, and it wasn't enough. Just like Sam. Just like—" "Stop!" Clara pulled him against her, holding tight when he tried to pull away. "You're not God. Eli McKenna, you can't save everyone. You can't control who lives and who dies." They clung to each other in the straw, crying for their son, for Sam, for all the losses that had shaped them. When the tears finally stopped, they were different, not healed, but no longer bleeding alone. Spring came slowly to Wyoming, but it came. The snow melted, revealing the green shoots of hope beneath. Clara planted a garden by Samuel's grave, wildflowers that would bloom in summer, marking the brief life that had touched theirs. As the days warmed, something else became clear. The town's attitude was shifting. The story of Clara spotting the rustlers' ambush had spread, growing in the telling. Women who'd shunned her began to nod when they passed. Men who'd refused Eli's business started finding excuses to visit the ranch. The real change came on Easter Sunday. Clara hadn't been to church since the trial, but something drew her that morning, a need for ritual, for community, for something larger than her grief. "You sure about this?" Eli asked as they dressed in their best clothes. "No." Clara pinned her hat with steady hands. "But hiding hasn't helped. Maybe it's time to stop letting them dictate our lives." The church was packed, families in their Easter finery filling every pew. Conversation died as Eli and Clara entered, every head turning to stare. For a moment, Clara almost fled. Then Sarah Morrison stood up. "There's room here," she said clearly, gesturing to the space beside her. It was like a dam breaking. Charlie Brennan scooted over to make room. Dr. Holcomb nodded approval. Even Tom Morrison, after a sharp elbow from his wife, grudgingly shifted to allow them passage. Not everyone was welcoming. Dorothy McKenna, returned from her sisters and sitting in the front pew, kept her back rigid and her eyes forward. Several families gathered their children closer, as if poverty and scandal might be contagious. But for the first time in months, Eli and Clara weren't completely alone. After the service, Reverend Morrison, no relation to the banker, stopped them at the door. "I heard about your loss," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I wasn't there to pray over the child." "That was wrong of me." Clara's eyes filled. "His name was Samuel." "Samuel McKenna." The Reverend nodded. "I'll add him to the church records. No child should go unrecorded, regardless of circumstances." As they walked to their wagon, Clara noticed something else. People talking to each other, really talking, about loss and grief and the children who'd been taken too soon. Her visibility and sorrow had given others permission to acknowledge their own. Mrs. McKenna, a young woman, approached hesitantly. Jane Garrett, whose husband worked at the bank. I lost 3 babies before my Mary was born. No one talks about it, but I wanted you to know you're not alone." One by one, women approached. Some offered condolences. Others shared their own losses. By the time they reached the wagon, Clara understood something profound. Grief was the great equalizer. Rich or poor, proper or scandalous. Every woman who'd lost a child understood that particular anguish. Hypocrites, Eli muttered as they drove away. Shun you when you're happy. Embrace you when you're broken. Maybe, Clara leaned against his shoulder. Or maybe grief teaches us what really matters. Either way, I'll take their compassion over their cruelty. The thaw in the town's attitude meant practical changes too. The bank approved Eli's loan for feed and breeding stock. Ranchers who'd kept their distance began hiring the Circle M for horse training again. Some of the old hands drifted back, sheepish but needing work. By late spring, Clara was strong enough to ride again. She and Eli took long trips into the mountains, sometimes talking, sometimes just being together in the vast silence. On one such ride, they stopped by a crystalline lake hidden in a valley of pines. Samuel would have loved this, Clara said softly. Teaching him to fish, to ride, to love this land like you do. There can be other children, Eli said carefully. They danced around this topic for weeks. When you're ready, if you want. Clara dismounted and walked to the water's edge, watching her reflection ripple. I'm terrified, she admitted. What if it happens again? What if I can't carry a baby to term? What if... Then we face it together. Eli joined her, taking her hand, like we should have the first time. The town's just starting to accept us. Another baby, especially if something goes wrong again. Do you care what they think? Clara considered. Less than I did, but I won't lie and say it doesn't matter at all. I want our children to have friends, to be part of something larger than just our ranch. Then we keep building bridges. Eli pulled her close. One person at a time, one kindness at a time. We've come this far. As summer approached, Clara found her strength returning. The garden bloomed wild and beautiful over Samuel's grave. The ranch prospered with the new stock and returning workers. Even Dorothy made overtures toward reconciliation, though pride kept her from fully apologizing. Clara was in the garden one evening, weeding around the tomatoes, when nausea struck without warning. She sat back on her heels, hand going instinctively to her stomach, and knew with sudden certainty, another child, another chance. This time, the fear was matched by hope. She'd survived the worst, loss, ostracism, grief that threatened to tear her apart. She was stronger now, and not alone. When Eli came in from the fields, she met him at the door. I have something to tell you, she said. His face went still. Clara? I'm pregnant. She caught his hands, placed them on her still flat stomach, and this time, I'm not going to be afraid. This baby will be born into a community, with people who'll help us through whatever comes. Eli kissed her then, there in the doorway with the setting sun painting the mountains gold. When they broke apart, his eyes were wet. Boy or girl? He asked. Girl, Clara said with sudden certainty, strong and stubborn like her parents. What will we name her? Clara thought of the women who'd approached her at church, offering solidarity born of shared sorrow, of Sarah Morrison's courage in standing first, of the way community could grow from the ashes of judgment. Hope, she said. We'll name her Hope. 10 years had transformed the Circle M Ranch from a place of isolation into the beating heart of the valley. The house, once cold with grief and propriety, now rang with children's laughter and the constant traffic of neighbors seeking Clara's medical knowledge or Eli's counsel on everything from horse breeding to water rights. Clara stood at the kitchen window on a crisp November morning, watching her children play in the yard. Hope, now 9, was every bit as strong and stubborn as predicted, her dark hair flying as she raced her younger brother Thomas across the frost-touched grass. Little Margaret, barely 4, toddled after them with determination that reminded Clara painfully and beautifully of another child who'd fought so hard to live. Mama, look! Thomas, 7 and fearless, had climbed to the top rail of the corral fence. I can see forever. Get down before you break your neck. Clara called, but she was smiling. After losing Samuel, she'd learned the delicate balance between protection and freedom, between fear and faith. Eli emerged from the barn, catching Thomas as he jumped down. Your mother's right, son. Save the climbing for the trees. But Pa climbs the windmill. Hope protested with the logic of a child who missed nothing. When I'm fixing it, Eli corrected. But he was grinning as he swung Margaret onto his shoulders. Not for the view. They made a handsome picture. Clara thought. Her tall, weathered husband with their youngest on his shoulders. The older children dancing around him like puppies. The years had added silver to Eli's temples and deepened the lines around his eyes. But contentment had softened the harsh angles grief had carved into his face. Mrs. McKenna? The voice belonged to Jenny Patterson, the shopkeeper's daughter, now grown and standing hesitantly at the gate. I'm sorry to bother you, but Mama said you might help. My sister Rose is having trouble with the baby coming, and Doc Holcomb's out at the Brennan place with Charlie's broken leg. Clara was already reaching for her medical bag, kept always ready by the door. Over the years, she'd become the Valley's unofficial midwife and healer, learning from books Eli ordered from Denver and from the Mexican curanderas who shared their knowledge in exchange for her own growing expertise. Hope, watch the young ones, Clara instructed, kissing Eli quickly. I'll be back when I can. Be careful, he murmured against her hair. Even now, after all these years, he worried when she left the ranch. Some wounds never fully healed, only scarred over enough to bear weight. The Patterson house was in chaos when Clara arrived, Rose laboring hard while her mother fluttered helplessly. Clara took charge with the calm authority a decade of births had given her, sending Jenny for hot water and Mrs. Patterson for clean linens. Clara, thank God, Rose gasped between contractions. I'm scared. What if— None of that. Clara checked the baby's position with gentle hands. Fear makes everything harder. You're strong. Rose, your baby's strong. We're going to do this together. 6 hours later, Rose cradled a healthy daughter while Clara cleaned up Mrs. Patterson. The same woman who'd once refused to sell Clara fabric pressed a gold coin into her hand. I can't take this, Clara protested. You'll take it and be grateful. Mrs. Patterson said firmly. I was wrong about you. Clara McKenna, dead wrong. My pride could have cost Rose her life if you'd held a grudge. Grudges are heavy things to carry. Clara said simply, I set mine down years ago. The ride home took her past the cemetery where Samuel lay between Eli's father and Sam. She stopped, as she always did, to tend the wildflowers that bloomed year-round through careful cultivation. 3 small stones had joined the family plot over the years, babies from other families who'd had nowhere else to bury their lost ones. Clara tended them all, because grief shared was grief diminished. Another girl safely delivered, she told Samuel Stone. You'd have been 10 now, teaching Thomas to fish, protecting Hope from boys, making Margaret laugh with your silly faces. She touched the carved lamb atop the marker. We remember you every day. Back at the ranch, she found unexpected visitors. Dorothy McKenna sat in the parlor, aged but still formidable, watching her grandchildren with hungry eyes. The reconciliation had been slow and never complete, but Dorothy came for Sunday dinners now and sent gifts on birthdays. Grandmama brought peppermints, Margaret announced, sticky fingers clutching the candy. How wonderful, Clara said neutrally. She and Dorothy had achieved a careful peace, built on their mutual love for Eli and the children, but some distances couldn't be fully bridged. The children are well-mannered, Dorothy observed. You've done well with them. It was as close to approval as Clara would ever get, and she accepted it as such. Thank you. That evening, after the children were abed and Dorothy had returned to her small house in town, she'd never returned to the ranch permanently, Clara and Eli sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. Busy day, he asked, pulling her against his side. Rose Patterson had a girl, healthy and loud. Good. Eli was quiet for a moment. Remember when you couldn't buy fabric in their store? I remember. Clara traced patterns on his hand. Seems like a lifetime ago. You forgive easier than I do, Eli admitted. Sometimes I still want to make them pay for how they treated you. They've paid. Clara thought of all the women who'd come to her over the years, seeking help they couldn't get elsewhere, living with the knowledge of what they almost lost through pride. That's punishment enough. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. The night sounds of the ranch wrapped around them, horses shifting in the corral, an owl calling from the barn rafters, the windmill creaking in the breeze. Miguel asked about retiring. Eli said eventually. His joints are giving him trouble. Wants to go live with his daughter in Santa Fe. He's earned it. Clara would miss the old vaquero who'd stood by them through everything. Billy can take over as foreman. Already discussed it with him. He's ready. Eli chuckled, though he still turns red when Hope smiles at him. She's 9. And already breaking hearts. His voice grew thoughtful. Sometimes I look at our life and can't believe it's real. The children, the ranch thriving. You beside me every night. If someone had told me that morning I found you in the mud, you'd have said they were crazy. Probably would have shot them for lying. He turned her face up to his. Clara, I need to say something. Should have said it years ago. She waited, seeing the struggle in his eyes. Thank you, he said simply, for not giving up when I pushed you away, for fighting when I wanted to surrender, for showing me that walls keep out more than pain, they keep out life too. We saved each other. Clara corrected. That's what love does. They sat in companionable silence until the moon rose full and bright. Inside, one of the children coughed, and Clara tensed automatically, ready to check, but the sound didn't repeat. I've been thinking, she said carefully, about the old Jameson place. It's been abandoned since that night I sheltered there. What about it? What if we bought it, fixed it up? There are other women who come west with nothing, ending up with worse than nothing. We could give them a place to stay, help them find real work, real lives. Eli considered. Like a boarding house? Like hope, Clara said. The same kind you gave me. We gave each other, he corrected, echoing her earlier words. I think it's a fine idea. Sam would approve. He always did have a soft spot for strays. Like his brother. Must run in the family. Eli stood, pulling her up with him. Come on, Mrs. McKenna. Morning comes early, and Hope wants to help me break the new colt. That child's going to be the death of me, Clara muttered, but she was smiling. As they walked inside, Clara paused at the door, looking back at the land that had become home. The barn where Eli had first sheltered her stood solid against the sky. The garden where she'd learned to coax life from dry soil spread green and fertile. The graves on the hill watched over it all, reminders that joy and sorrow could exist in the same heart, neither canceling the other. You coming? Eli called softly. Yes, Clara said, and meant it in all possible ways. She was coming home, had been coming home since that desperate night in the rain when she'd collapsed at the gate of a stranger's ranch. Every step since had led here, to this man, these children, this life built on the ashes of what they'd lost. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Hope would insist on riding the half-broken colt. Thomas would certainly attempt something dangerous. Margaret would toddle into mischief. The town would gossip about their plan for the Jameson place. Dorothy would disapprove of something. Life would continue in all its messy, painful, glorious complexity. But tonight, Clara McKenna walked into her house, their house, where children slept safe and warm, where love had conquered judgment, where a mail-order bride in rags had found her soul's true home. The door closed softly behind them, lamplight glowing warm through the windows, a beacon in the vast Wyoming darkness that said simply, here is sanctuary, here is family, here is home, in the cemetery on the hill. Wind stirred the wildflowers on Samuel's grave, and somewhere in that rustling, it sounded almost like a blessing. Thank you all for joining me on this journey through Clara and Eli's story. I'd love to know where you're listening from, whether it's during your commute, by a cozy fire, or perhaps under the stars like our own Wyoming nights. Please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of love, loss, and redemption in the American frontier. And share your thoughts in the comments below. What touched your heart in this story? Until next time, partners.